Good morning, Year 5. It is Thursday, so that means it is our day for the big question. And this week we're looking at our big question for Journey to Joburg by Beverly Naidoo. So it's the 4th of February 2021. We're getting really into spring now, and we're going to look at our big question very shortly. However, before we do that, as always, we must look at our do now. So, as always, on day 4, your do now is to order these statements. I've attached the do now as part of the home learning document that you may print out, but of course, as always, as I say, you do not have to. It is provided here for you. You can quite simply, in your copybook, write the numbers in order as they come next to the statements. No need to write the full statements either. So, pause the video here, order those statements by looking at the text, which is also attached. You can open up the PDF, or if you have it printed out, then fantastic. Otherwise, pause the video, go ahead and start that do now. Okay, amazing. So we will talk through the answers. First one was done for you. Okay, number 1. Naledi suggests taking Dinio to the hospital. That was the first event that happened in the story. Then, number 2. Naledi and Tiro fetched the day's water. Well done if you got that. Number 3 was done for you. Naledi slipped into the house and took the letter from Ma. Then number 4. Naledi and Tiro started to walk to Joburg or Johannesburg. Number 5, Naledi and Tiro stopped to eat and rest. And number 6, they walked through the small town at the end when they were trying to avoid the police. So that's your do now. Pause the video here once again if you need extra time to mark your work. Otherwise, we're going to go on and start looking for some evidence. Before we do that though, we need to understand what the big question is about. This week, our big question is, who would you prefer to embark on this 300-kilometre journey to Johannesburg with, Naledi or Tiro? So, what that question is looking for is, who would you prefer to go on this journey with? It is essentially a question asking about character. So you will have to discuss the character of Naledi or Tiro, or make reference to both throughout your answer. Now, it is entirely up to you who you want to go with, whether it's Naledi or Tiro, but as always, you must support your answer with at least 2 pieces of evidence from the text. And I've seen so many of you do some wonderful answers. I've seen some of you make some fantastic points and leave out evidence, but then I've seen you come back the next week and then put in some amazing evidence to make your answer absolutely fantastic. So I'm really excited to read these today, as I do every Thursday. It really brightens up my Thursday looking at your big question answers. Okay, so just to explain once more, you're looking at character, Naledi or Tiro, and kind of the impression you get of them, and therefore who would you rather go with. So a couple of weeks ago we had a question on what impression did we get of a character. That means we need to think of what the character is like, come up with adjectives to describe them as our points, and then use evidence to support those points. Okay, so also one last point before I forget is that you can't really argue saying I would like to go with Naledi, however on the other hand I'd enjoy Tiro as well. If you're going on a 300-kilometre journey, you really need to choose just one person. I know last week we were able to debate and write an argument to balance both sides. However, this week I'd encourage you just to pick Naledi or Tiro. So you can't go away and find your evidence just yet, because I'm going to show you how to do that once again. Now, as we read along, you may note down pieces of evidence as well that I have not found. So I'm going to read, find my own evidence. As I read, you can find your own as well. Then we'll come back, look at the question again, write a model answer so that you can also produce the best possible work. So, on we go. I will now flip to my visualizer, which I hope will work. We will look at chapter 1, Naledi's plan. Okay, so as I read, I have my pen in my hand, ready to make notes about who would I rather go with, Naledi or Tiro. I haven't quite decided who I want to go with yet, but I will soon get the impression of both characters as I read through. So, chapter 1. Naledi and Tiro were worried. Their baby sister Dinio was ill, very ill. For 3 days now, none of their granny had been trying to cool her fever, with damp cloths placed on her little head and body. And Gwanwe, their auntie, made her take sips of water, but still their sister lay hot and restless, crying softly at times. Can't we take Dinio to the hospital? Naledi begged, but Nano said Dinio was much too sick to be carried that far. The only hospital was many kilometres away, and Naledi also knew they had no money to pay a doctor to visit them. No one in their village had that much money. If only Ma was here, Naledi wished over and over, as she and Tiro walked down to the village tap with their empty buckets. She clutched tightly at the coins in her hand. Each morning, the children had to pass the place of the graves on their way to buy the day's water, and only last week, another baby in the village had died. It was always scary seeing the little graves, but especially this fresh one now. As they came nearer, Naledi fixed her eyes on the ground ahead, trying not to look, trying not to think. But it was no use. She couldn't stop herself thinking of her own little sister being lowered into a hole in the ground. Finally, Naledi could stand it no longer. When they had returned with the water, she called Tiro to the back of the house and spoke bluntly. "We must get Ma or Dinio is going to die." "But how?" Tiro was bewildered. Their mother worked and lived in Johannesburg, more than 300 kilometres away. "We can get to the big road and walk," Naledi replied calmly. Okay, so maybe that's the point you want to make. Naledi is quite calm, whereas Tiro is a bit bewildered. Okay, maybe you'd rather go with Naledi because Tiro is a bit confused, where she is quite a calming influence. However, that's not a point I'm going to make, but you could if you wanted. It was the school holidays now, but in term time it took the children more than an hour to walk to school each day, so they were used to walking. Naledi wasn't going to let herself think how much longer it would take to get to Johannesburg. Okay, here's a point I like. I'm going to underline, Naledi wasn't going to let herself think how much longer it would take to get to Johannesburg. I'm just going to write a note on the side that I would prefer to go with Naledi based on this evidence because I think she is a determined person. So that's the impression I get of Naledi as a character, that she is determined, and I could then use this evidence to support me if I wanted later on in my answer. Okay, and at any point you may pause the video if you find evidence that you want to make note of too. Okay, I will continue. However, Tiro was not so sure. "But Nano doesn't want us to worry, and I know she won't let us go." "That's just it," Naledi retorted quickly. "Nano and Mgwanwe keep saying Dinio will be better soon. You heard them talking last night. They say they don't want to send Ma a telegram and frighten her. What if they wait and it's too late?" Tiro thought for a moment. "Can't we send Ma a telegram? How can we if we haven't the money? And if we borrow some, Nano will hear about it and be very cross with us." It was clear that Naledi had made up her mind, and that Tiro knew his sister. She was 4 years older than him, already 13, and once she had decided something, that was that. So another quote here that might help me to support me in my answer would be to say that Naledi is 13 and Tiro, as we worked out yesterday, is only 9. So that I wouldn't really want to travel with someone who's 9 if I had the option of a 13-year-old, because it appears Tiro is too young, whereas Naledi kind of has her head screwed on. She's a little bit more mature, whereas Tiro kind of worries a lot. So maybe that's another point that you could make to support your answer if you want to travel with Naledi. Or maybe you enjoy the innocence of Tiro, who's a little bit more younger and probably isn't more aware of the danger. Maybe you would prefer that. Okay, but there's 2 points I've made so far, but I'm not finished yet because I haven't finished the text. The children went to find Naledi's friend Peleng and explained. Peleng was very surprised, but agreed to help. She would tell Nano once the children had gone, and she also promised to help their granny, bringing the water and doing the other jobs. "How will you eat on the way?" Peleng asked. Tiro looked worried, but Naledi was confident. "Oh, we'll find something." Okay, here's an absolute point that I want to make if I was arguing that I prefer to travel with Naledi. Tiro looked worried, but Naledi was confident. Okay, Naledi seems to be a confident character, whereas Tiro is quite of a worrier. So I've just made a little note here saying confident versus Tiro's constant worry. So just made a quick note. You can do that in your book as well or on the text if you have it printed. This is the quote that I could use to support that point. "Oh, we'll find something." Peleng told them to wait and ran into her house, returning soon with a couple of sweet potatoes and a bottle of water. The children thanked her. She was indeed a good friend. Before they could go, Naledi had to get the last letter Ma had sent, so they would know where to look for her in the big city. Slipping into the house, Naledi took the letter quietly from the tin, without Nano or Mgwanwe noticing. Both were busy with Dinio as Naledi slipped out again. Chapter 2. The Road. The children walked quickly away from the village. The road was really just a track made by car tires, 2 lines of dusty red earth leading out across the flat, dry grassland. Once at the big tar road, they turned in the direction of the early morning sun, for that was the way to Johannesburg. The steel railway line glinted along the roadside. If only we had some money to buy tickets for the train. We don't even have 1 cent, Tiro sighed. Never mind, we'll get there somehow. Naledi was still confident as they set off eastwards. Okay, so here's another quote perhaps I could use. We'll get there somehow. So I'm really on the side of Naledi here from what I've said. And Tiro also sighed, so I can start using maybe multiple quotes for 1 point, more than 1 quote. Naledi still, that builds on the idea of confidence. Whereas Tiro, they haven't even left the village really, and he's already sighing, worried about not making it, and he'd rather be on a train. So he's quite defeatist, whereas Naledi seems to have more confidence in herself and resilience as well. Okay, if only Ma was here. Oops, I read that already. My apologies. Let's walk at the side, Tiro suggested. The grass was dry and scratchy, but they were used to it. Now and again, a car or a truck roared by, and then the road was quiet again, and they were alone. Naledi began to sing the words of her favourite tune, and Tiro was soon joining in. On they walked. So again, another quote here to support my argument for Naledi. She began to sing her favourite tune, and Tiro was soon joining in. So she is keeping spirits high. I've made a little note of that. Tiro, she knows, faltering or struggling. She's kept the spirits high, and I think that is someone I would like to travel with as well. If things were difficult, who would keep my spirits up? Okay, let's continue. Can't we stop and eat? Tiro was beginning to feel sharp stabs of hunger, but here he's whining again about being hungry. But to be fair, he's young. Naledi is a bit older and stronger. But Naledi wanted to go on until they reached the top of the long, low hill ahead. Their legs slowed down as they began the walk uphill, their bodies feeling heavy. At last they came to the top and flopped down to rest. Hungrily they ate their sweet potatoes and drank the water. The air was hot and still. Some of the birds skimmed lightly across the sky as they gazed down at the long road ahead. It stretched into the distance between fenced-off fields and dry grass, up to another far-off hill. Come on, we must get on, Naledi insisted, pulling herself up quickly. She could tell that Tiro was already tired, but they couldn't afford to stop for long. The sun had already passed its midday position, and they didn't seem to have travelled very far. On they walked, steadily singing, to break the silence. But in the middle of the afternoon, when the road led into a small town, they stopped singing and began to walk a little faster. They were afraid a policeman might stop them, because they were strangers. Policemen were dangerous. Even in their village, they knew that. The older children at school had made up a song. Beware that policeman, he'll want to see your pass, he'll say it's not in order, that day may be your last. Grown-ups were always talking about this pass. If you wanted to visit some place, the pass must allow it. If you wanted to change your job, the pass must allow it. It seemed everyone in school knew somebody who had been in trouble over the pass. Okay, remember the pass was what Black South Africans over the age of 16 had to carry with them to show where they lived and worked. Right, so I found plenty of evidence throughout the text of Naledi probably being a stronger character, and I've used adjectives to describe her as well. However, you may argue that you'd rather travel with Tiro. Of course, it's entirely up to you, as I said earlier, as long as you support it with evidence from the text. 2 pieces of evidence. Evidence means a quote. Now, you may have been making notes as I read. That's absolutely fine. If you have not found your evidence yet, then you'll need to pause the video here and open up the PDF and find some evidence and make notes before we go and look at our answer. If you have, then fantastic. We're going to continue. I'm going to look at writing a model answer. So, here is my big question. And here is it all underlined with the date. So I'm ready to go with my answer. Okay, so in a moment you'll have to do the same. But firstly, I'm going to model again looking at PEE. What does P stand for? Point. What does the first E stand for? Evidence. What does the second E stand for? Yes, your explanation. Very, very good. Okay, as always, I use my question to be able to start my first sentence of my answer. So, as it's my opinion, and it's something personal to me who I'd rather travel with, I'm going to write personally to start. We normally start with my opinion, but let's just change it for today. Personally, I would prefer travel on this journey to Joburg, or Johannesburg if you want to write it out, with Naledi. So I've made it quite clear to the reader who I want to go with. Now, that's my opening. Now I'm going to give my reasons, or my points. So remember, it's really just an impression of a character I'm getting. So one word I would use to describe Naledi that I really like about her is Naledi is a determined person who believes she will succeed. And this is someone, I really like this trait of hers, enjoy traveling with. That's my point. I think she's determined and I like that about her. I will now give my evidence. And I've taken it straight from the book. Quote, Naledi wasn't going to let herself think how much longer it would take to get there. So, there's my point, there's my evidence, and I'm going to explain what I mean by this. So this shows that Naledi has a positive attitude, so that's what I really like about her. Positive outlook or attitude. Outlook is how someone looks on the world. And is determined to reach her destination. So, let's just have a look at my first point to see if I have followed the steps to success. I'll get out my pink marker just to show it. Right, I started with my introduction and just said, I'd rather go with Naledi. Simple. Then, Naledi is a determined person, has essentially my point that I've made and I've slightly expanded on it. P, done. Evidence from the text. Done. This shows that she's determined. Explanation done. Okay, one mark received, 1 point made, evidence and explanation to support it, but I need 2. So I'm going to make a second point. I'm going to choose a different word to describe Naledi, and I am going to choose she is confident, yeah, because I found plenty of evidence that she was confident. So that's what I'm going to go with. So I can link my 2 points together. As well as being a determined individual, Naledi is also a confident person. And I can contrast her to her brother, who I don't think is confident, as opposed to Tiro, who is constantly worrying. So I would much prefer travel with Naledi because she's confident, she's determined. Tiro is too much of a worrier for me. Right, point made. Now I need a quote. Tiro looked worried but Naledi was confident. I mean, that quote just sums up the difference between the two people and why I would rather go on Naledi. Tír looked worried, but Naledi was confident. That sums up the difference in the character and the impression I get between the two characters. Point, evidence done. Now, my explanation. So I would prefer to travel with this confident girl than a young boy like Tiro, who was filled with constant worry. Okay, let's look at my second point. Have I followed the steps of success of PEE? As well as being a determined individual, Naledi is also a confident person. That's essentially my point. Done. Pink. P. Next, evidence to support that. Tír looked worried, but Naledi was confident. Evidence supporting my point. Done. Now, to finish off, get my full marks. Let me explain it. Travel with this confident girl than a young boy like Tiro. Okay, I'm using Tiro to contrast with Naledi to say that I would rather be with Naledi. So, made my point. Evidence explained times 2. I did it again with my second one. So your job now is to go and answer this question yourself using evidence, 2 points, 2 pieces of evidence, 2 explanations to build a really good big question answer, because what I've seen so far has been outstanding. So have a lovely Thursday. I'll see you tomorrow for some non-fiction reading and we will talk then.